So it's great to see so many people here. And what we were going to talk about is a project that we've been running with Ulster University. So it's part of the BT Ireland Innovation Centre. And what we were trying to do with the project was kind of take a fresh look at what IoT is. So many people, including myself, have been in IoT for quite a few years. We all get the vision. So the idea is you can collect data from various sensors and other devices, and then from that data you can help people to make better decisions. But at the risk of oversharing, I thought I might share a story from last week. So my Friday nights, don't worry, that it's not that exciting. It's certainly not in the last few years. But so last Friday night, I found myself in a supermarket car park, queuing behind probably about 20 vehicles, trying to collect petrol at the car park. And of course, my wife turns to me and says, but hasn't IoT solved this? Haven't you deployed sensors so that you know kind of how much fuel there is, what the queue of traffic looks like, and therefore, shouldn't this be a solved problem? And the link back to Matrix is, I guess, when we were thinking about starting the work with the university, we were trying to think about what are the key challenges that stop that from happening. So, of course, from a technology perspective, it's actually relatively straightforward to deploy some sensors, collect the data, and then provide it to people in an app so that they can see that actually there is enough fuel, you don't need to queue, or people like myself who are stuck in traffic jams of people trying to get petrol, that there's a queue, so you don't need to, you probably should avoid that time shopping. So it kind of says to me that there's more challenges that need to be addressed in the IoT space. And Matrix was, or is, one of the views of looking at what you can do from a technology angle to address some of those challenges. So thank you for humouring me whilst I shared my Friday night story. But I'll take you through some of the slides now. So hopefully green is next slide.
Working. Maybe it's not.
I don't know how we get the next slide. There we go. So what we thought we'd talk about first, so just a bit of an overview of the talk. So we'll talk about some of the challenges and opportunities in the IoT space. Then Claudia is going to take you through the platform that's been created and some of the value-added services. And then we'll wrap up at the end. So quite often smart cities projects start, IoT projects start in smart cities. That's true for ourselves as well. And there's lots of good understanding of the business challenges that exist in smart cities now. So typically, there's a need to reduce congestion, so to make the traffic flow better. So it's back to that point I was making at the start, that if you can get people the right information, they make better decisions and the system works better. Then there's lots of kind of knock-on benefits for the cities themselves. So that potentially it pushes people more towards public transport, so there's revenue opportunities. There's optimization of their own infrastructure, so if you can start to include sensors that detect the number of vehicles on roads, then you can start to reduce street lighting, for example. So there's lots of kind of key benefits that come out of deploying IoT in cities. And we kind of often say that almost everything looks like a smart city. So if you think about what goes in a factory, you've got a range of interacting systems. You've got typically a number of different organizations trying to work together. And it's the same story. So there's lots of benefits that can be had. So you can, for example, look at public worker safety. So you can use CCTV, you can identify which areas people are in, and then based on that information, you can understand whether your workers are in the right areas in the factory to minimize risks. So there's lots of kind of business opportunity out there, and yet I'm kind of still back to myself in the car park. I can't get past that why has it not happened? So here's just an overview of some of the challenges that we see. So it's really easy to run small-scale proof of concepts. The challenges often come when you try to scale that. And the level of complexity you get increases very, very rapidly. So it's everything from kind of how you deploy devices, how you know that they continue to be deployed in a safe way. There's also monitoring the systems. So BT, we're typically a service provider, so we're interested in what experience our customers are getting. How do we monitor that in an automated way? there's still evolving standards and best practices. So there's lots of kind of technology space to go for. And then there are other challenges as well. So there's some around the business case. So making sure that you've got aligned your business case with the spend and some of the kind of more business side. But for this talk, we were going to focus on those technology challenges. And the Matrix platform, which, as I mentioned at the start, is a joint initiative with Ulster University. And what we were trying to do there was kind of set, actually, here are some challenges that should be solvable from a technology perspective, and then let the kind of bright folk at the university go ahead, explore those challenges and come up with solutions for them. So I'm going to hand over to Claudia, who will take you through some of the technology that's been developed.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So yeah, Matrix, what is it? Matrix is a novel IoT platform that we've developed that aims to solve issues in current IoT deployments, particularly in the areas of sort of the resilience, the scalability, and the security concerns that often come with, when we talk about IoT. So it was initially sort of developed as an IoT platform, but what's actually happened within the project, it's been used as a testing and an integration platform for a lot of the other projects going on around in BTIIC that it may not necessarily be related to IoT, but have got challenges of their own in terms of security, GDPR issues, SLAs, and that's helped us develop a platform that is agnostic across different verticals as well. So one of the main problems with IoT and one of the services that we've developed as part of Matrix is all around the provisioning and the management of IoT devices. So it's quite easy for you to go and buy a sensor off the shelf and connect it yourself. It takes about 10-15 minutes to do, but when you're doing this at scale, it really is a problem. So that's one of the things that we aim to solve with Matrix, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that in a little while. The other thing is around GDPR and service level agreement compliance, particularly when we're collecting a lot of data, when there's video involved and lots of different sources of information coming in. How do we make sure that we're complying with GDPR and that SLAs are being maintained, but do it in an automated way? Currently, there's a lot of manual processes involved, which make it expensive and not scalable at all. So a lot of what we're trying to achieve with Matrix is there's a lot of different services out there that are very focused, and you need an expert to do that configuration for you. And you can build a service that's secure, resilient, and scalable, but it's very, very costly, and for you to maintain it can be very expensive. And a lot of manpower. So can we automate a lot of those processes? And that's really what Matrix is about. So in this autonomic world that we're thinking about, if we look at how a typical IoT system works, you've got your sensors at the bottom. You need some sort of IoT service broker, so that's the bit that does what I was saying around the provisioning, the management, the onboarding of these technologies onto a platform. Without that, you're not going to get the data out. And then if we skip the middle bit and go to the top, you have all the applications that consume the data from these sensors, and that's where you start to get value. There's a lot that needs to happen in the middle for this to be achieved, and that's where we think these features of Matrix fit in, is in this sort of self-configuring, autonomic view of the world, where we're sort of taking part of the human out of the loop and automating a lot of the sort of more tedious, more expensive tasks. So for example, I already talked a little bit about the self-configuration, but self-healing. So once we're looking across an IoT ecosystem, it's not just about the sensor and the network. There's security issues, SLAs that I've mentioned. There's a lot of IoT applications involved. You've got your virtual network functions that need to be there. So right there, you need sort of already 3 or 4 different experts in a world where people are always trying to gain a competitive advantage and security issues happen every day. How can we mitigate that and have a system that can detect that something's wrong and resolve itself without having to sort of wait for a human in the loop to sort of find that out and apply the correct policies around all these different areas? So all around sort of self-healing, self-protecting, and also how can we get to a stage where we've got a platform that's self-optimizing? Can the platform itself understand, well, actually, running this particular application on this device isn't the most effective way. It's not, I'm not getting the data as quickly as I can be. Could I move this application somewhere else to a different gateway, to a different server, and get that optimization, that sort of latency down? But again, having the AI in there that can do all this for us. And we've got here sort of the value-added services for Industry 0.4, but as Andrew mentioned, it spans across all different verticals, from cities to factories to sort of transport. These problems are there, and what we're trying to do is sort of fix them and make IoT a little bit more appealing and usable within enterprises. So how does it work? So this is a high-level architecture of Matrix. So on the left there, we've got all our different environments. So this could be anything, as we've mentioned, from healthcare to cities to industry, transport. And this is ultimately the environments where you're going to deploy some sensors. And we talk about sort of temperature sensors, so small different things. But increasingly as well, we're using things like cameras as a sensor, because it just makes sense with that AI, the video analytics. You can detect a lot of things from an image. But also we can't forget the more legacy systems, the things that are already there in place. It's not always about a greenfield site. How do we gain value and insight from systems that already are in place but may not be as easy to integrate to as newer IoT solutions? So the types of connectivity within Matrix, it's agnostic to anything really. There's adapters for all types of different sensors and ways of getting information in. And then we do all the clever stuff. Usually you need some sort of what we call Matrix edge, so something that sits quite close geographically to where you're collecting your data, because a lot of times these technologies, these sensors, are quite dumb actually. They have one job, which is to sense, but they don't always have the battery and the network to be able to transmit all the way to a cloud environment where you're going to do all your heavy lifting in terms of applications and the analytics. So you need this sort of edge compute capability that can extract the data, do some ETL, extract transformation and loading of the data. You might do some analytics here as well. And this is a device that needs to be, it's important to be secure in terms of the data and the networks that it has in and out. And often in these environments, these are in quite remote locations. So if you think you're putting sensors out there and they need to connect to something, these devices can be not accessible to us all the time, as in physically. So we need to make sure that we've got appropriate device management and security in that device to be able to do things like updating and patching of whatever services you've got. And then we've got the cloud, where we may do services and applications that are a little bit more heavy, so things like analytics, video processing, and making sure that the devices that we've got in terms of the gateways, the sensors, are kept up to date. So moving on to sort of picking on a couple of examples in a little bit more detail. So one of the problems with IoT devices is the onboarding process, the provisioning, and then the management of its life cycle once it has been deployed. So the onboarding and the attestation, really. So at the moment, you get a sensor delivered. Someone has to install it, plug it into the network. That device may have been in transit for quite a while. So perhaps the software that has been put on it is out of date, needs updating, might need some more things loaded onto it. So that needs an expert to come in and do that. Once it's connected up, you start up the sort of the cloud side of that sensor. That in itself can take around 20-30 minutes to do. So if you can imagine, when you're doing this at scale, that's going to be very expensive, require a lot of manual labor. So what we've tried to think about with Matrix is, can we provide a service within an IoT platform that can remove a lot of these manual steps? So the first thing that needs to happen is that connection. So can we make that zero touch? Can we pre-provision the device to connect, to call back home? Once it connects back home, we need to make sure, is this device still who we think it is? So zero-touch attestation. So there's a few ways of doing that and making sure that it's secure. So we've got a capability where you can generate keys on the hardware to make sure that the device hasn't been tampered with and check it with the sort of signature that you've got in the cloud. But doing it all sort of in software and without requiring someone to physically check. Once you are connected and once you've made sure that the device is who it says it is, you've got the bootstrapping side of it. So this is where you may update the device, where you load the software onto that device, and do it sort of without having, again, someone having to connect in. Once you do that, once it can achieve the sort of the connection, the attestation, the onboarding, there's the life cycle management of that device, which again we're automating with Matrix in terms of patching the device, and it goes back to sort of that autonomic vision where it's not just about connecting a device in, it's then what you need to update it, and things may go wrong, it may get attacked, policies need to be updating. So once you have that sort of zero-touch trust path, you can do all these things remotely. The other service that we've added to Matrix is around video anonymization. So, as I mentioned at the start, there's increasingly you're seeing that video is cameras are being used as sensors and then applying video analytics to detect different things. So a good example is in car parks. Traditionally, you may have seen sort of sensors on each of the bays. That's quite expensive. Can we have a camera looking at a whole row of spaces and determine whether a car is there or not? And then for an application, we can see that. What that means is you're going to get people in those frames. You're going to see all sorts of other things that you might not necessarily be interested in. But this is going into sort of that GDPR and privacy concerns that come with IoT. So we've got a solution that can look at sort of video and anonymize parts of it based on what you're interested in seeing. So if we imagine an environment, an industrial environment, where you may be wanting to do PPE detection. So seeing if someone is wearing the correct PPE for doing the job that they're meant to be doing. So what we can do is we're not really interested about everyone else in that picture. You may just be interested in a particular person doing a particular action. What we can do is, in an itemized way, is extract these elements of the video that you don't want to see. So in this case, faces. And through blockchain, we can, for DLT, secure those particular frames. That is then transferred to a cloud and the keys into DLT. And the video is as it is, goes back to a video analytics application where we're detecting PPE in this case. And then you can subscribe to different things. So in this particular instance, I just want to see if that person is wearing the correct PPE. So I request that information, and frame by frame, that's built up only for me to see, because I've subscribed to that data and I'm authorized to see that particular data. But I don't need to see anything else. And then you get your sort of PPE alert as well. But in an environment where privacy and security is increasingly becoming a problem, and with the use of video everywhere in cities, this can sort of break down some of those barriers that come with IoT and sort of the use of video to detect different things. Back to Andrew.
It's back to me, is it? Thank you, Claudia. So I guess what we've shown you is how we can take existing IoT platforms and then start to enhance them with additional technologies to try to address a broader set of use cases. So as Claudia talked about, zero-touch techniques. So the more we can take human steps out of it, the broader the set of use cases that we'll get to, because we start to remove the cost of deploying those devices and managing those devices. Then she talked through some of the video analytics work, and the key challenge there is, of course, around privacy. So wherever you've got video feeds, you need to make sure that only people who are allowed to see the data have access to it. And so Matrix has got these interesting techniques that use image recognition to pull out appropriate bits of the video that aren't due to be shared. Then it uses blockchain to make sure in a really secure way that it's only shared with who you allow it to. So we think Matrix is a really interesting evolution of the IoT platform. It's come from our BT Ireland Innovation Centre, which is this collaboration with Ulster University. Anyone that caught our panel discussion, we talked about that in a bit of detail. So it's a novel way of trying to get ideas from fundamental research in the university through the applied research teams in a corporate like BT, and then into the engineering teams. Where we are with the project at the moment, so we've been running, BTIIC's been running for about 4 years now, so we've done a lot of the early research around Matrix, and we're looking at how we now transition that into real-world trials and the next steps. So again, all of this work was supported by InvestNI, and they're continuing to support us on that journey. So we've just recruited our first KTP who's going to look at downstreaming Matrix, and hopefully over the next kind of few months, 12 months, we'll start to see it kind of moving from the university and the BT research labs and out into real-world examples. So I think that's our last slide. Yep. So we're open for questions.
Andrew, Christina, thank you very much. Great presentation, really involved and really interesting. Where do you see this going over the next, year or two?
Do you want me to take that? So where we are at the moment, we're going to get to those trials. So Matrix promises quite a lot. So it promises zero-touch deployment of devices. It promises to resolve some of those challenges with video anonymization. What we need to do is test that they work in the real world. So we're looking at a number of our own customers as opportunities to trial with, and then get that real validation of both the technology. And at the start, I was talking about some of the challenges are actually about the business case. So if we can show we can lower the cost of deployments and we can lower the cost of management, it starts to open up those additional business cases. So it's from the lab to the real world next to us.
And this does have wide-ranging business implications, doesn't it, across all companies and different parts of the company. Is that where we've talked at all the previous sessions about when technology meets people, there's sometimes an issue there? Is that something you're looking at and something you think is a challenge?
Yeah, so I think one of the challenges in all verticals is we think of like the technology and we think this is amazing, but like customers aren't really interested in how it works. They just want it to work. So it's understanding sort of that intent that the customer has and translating into technology that's going to work for them. And that's what we're trying to achieve here with Matrix. It's just, as Andrew says, getting that validation and it just got to work, doesn't it?
Exactly. It's just got to work. I love that. Thank you very much. Christina, Andrew, thank you very much for your time. Round of applause, please.
Thank you.